Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Scott Ritter, and Scott and I are going to talk about the movie Oppenheimer, or is it Oppenheimer?
I think it's Oppenheimer. Yeah. Oppenheimer, yeah, I guess, yeah. Tomato.
Right. So what was your impression of the movie? You saw it.
Well, I mean, first of all, the director of the film is a very well-known director, Christopher Nolan, and he produces very high-quality films, and this is an extraordinarily high-quality film. The actor who portrays J. Robert Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy, is outstanding. All the actors, everybody who played in this film did a fantastic job. So if you were to approach this film just as attending a movie, not knowing what was going on, not knowing any of the context or anything, you would be entertained. It's an entertaining film. Even if you know something about the story, this film spends more time on the personal trials and tribulations surrounding J. Robert Oppenheimer's relationship with the U.S. government and his personal life than it does about the horrors of nuclear war. And so you would find this movie to be informative. And it was. It was illuminating because most people haven't done the deep dig into Oppenheimer's relationship with the U.S. government. They're not aware of what happened to him after the Trinity test. The Trinity test is sort of Oppenheimer's, defining moment. The Trinity test being the test of the nuclear weapon on July 16th, 1945, in Alamogordo, New Mexico, a successful test that paved the way for the dropping of 2 atomic bombs, one on Hiroshima on August 6th, which is just coming up this Sunday, and the second a few days later, August 9th on Nagasaki. After that, Oppenheimer disappears from the radar for most people. Most people aren't aware of what he did to try and put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, having recognized the horror of the weapon that had been created and the fact that it was being used as a vehicle. The program that he oversaw, the Manhattan Project, was being used as a vehicle to produce a new generation of even more horrific weapons, the so-called super. We are introduced to the concept of the super in the movie. Edward Teller, a brilliant Hungarian physicist, spent World War II trying to perfect the hydrogen bomb. While it wasn't done during the World War II, Teller's super was tested and became the centerpiece of America's nuclear arsenal going forward, and indeed the arsenals of all nations developing nuclear weapons because of its tremendous power. But Oppenheimer tried to put that genie back in the bottle. He argued against expanding the nuclear enterprise, and he paid a price. He lost his security clearance. They humiliated the man who did what his country asked him to do. I also don't think that they put the nuclear weapon in proper perspective on either side of the equation. There's some throwaway dialogue in there. For instance, we have to build this bomb before the Germans build this bomb. Mm-hmm. Which is a true statement. I mean, if you think about it, of course we did. We had no choice. And so for all the people out there that are like, Oppenheimer's evil, I think you'd have to recognize that Nazi Germany was a greater evil, and any nation that will shove 6 million Jews into concentration camps and have them exit out the funnels of crematorium. Any nation that would invade nations like the Soviet Union, resulting in the slaughter of 27 million people, cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And if they're going to develop a nuclear weapon, then the good guys, us, need to have a weapon in deterrence. I think they needed to make that point even more, because I think it's important to put the Oppenheimer story in perspective to understand the necessity of this weapon. I know today, and I'm one of the people that says I'm very against nuclear war. But the bottom line is, in the 1940s, there was a real concern that Nazi Germany was going to. I mean, they had a nuclear weapons program. We didn't know exactly what they were trying to do, how far they had progressed. But assumptions have to be made that when they have the world's most capable physicists, and we're introduced to the head of the German nuclear program in this movie, an academic, a physicist who taught Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer knew how good this guy was, and so I think that aspect of it's missing as well. This is a story about Oppenheimer. It's not a story about the bomb, and I think that's one of the problems with the movie, so to speak, because this could have been an opportunity to educate Americans about the bomb, about nuclear weapons, about the horrors of nuclear weapons, put it in a historical, context. They even when the war ends against Germany and they move forward with the bomb with Japan as the target, it's just not. The story isn't developed properly enough. The fact that the bomb was really meant to deter the Soviet Union, not defeat Japan, is not developed enough. The fact that no matter what, we were going to drop a bomb on Japan. That's what people never get out of this movie. The reality is that had Germany not been defeated in time, if the war had continued, and we were going to drop the bomb, we were going to drop two bombs, one on Japan, one on Germany simultaneously, because you can't drop one on the other and keep it secret. You had to drop it on them both. So no matter what, we were going to bomb Japan, even if the target was Germany. That's left out of the equation. There's an important scene in the movie where, after the Trinity test, there's two men in uniform. They're from the first Special Ordnance Squadron, which are the bomb makers. They're the guys that take the device, the gadget that Oppenheimer scientists have made, and turn it into a weapon capable of being deployed by a B-29 bomber. And so they're there packaging it up, and Oppenheimer comes in and he's talking about the right altitude to drop it from, and they say, "It's okay, boss, we got it from here," meaning your job is done, we've taken over. And that's an extraordinarily important moment in history, because the feeling among Oppenheimer and his fellow scientists was that, having given birth to this weapon, that they could somehow play a role in managing how the weapon was being used. They felt that they could bring their intellectual capacity to bear on the problem, to have some sort of a moral standing with the decision makers, to implore them not to use this weapon, etc. What they don't understand is, having given birth to it, they're no longer needed. They're no longer wanted. They don't count. The only people that count are the people that are going to use the bomb. And that's the military, the nuclear establishment, the birth of the nuclear establishment, and how they took the ownership of the weapon away from those who built and designed it. And again, it's there in the movie, but the importance of that moment is lost on people who don't know about the overall story. And that's the thing. On Sunday, August 6th, I'll be gathering with other like-minded individuals in New York City to demonstrate, to speak out against nuclear weapons, to promote nuclear disarmament. My dogs are encouraging me in this work. I actually think I have a FedEx package coming to the door, so this could be disruptive here. But this movie is important in terms of its timing in relationship to August 6th, because it could have been used as a vehicle to better educate people about August 6th, about Hiroshima, about the horrors of the use of nuclear weapons. I think most Americans know that we dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. I think that's part of our history. But they don't know about the weapon. And the other thing that we've lost as a collective is the horror of the weapon, fear of the weapon. Even the movie Oppenheimer when they show the test, they don't capture how awful that weapon was and how awful it would have been to be there. They capture it as a big event, but you don't leave that event feeling empty, feeling sickened. It's what I say about the movie in general. This is a topic that should have a stunned an audience into silence. I've attended several movies in my life that have done that. Schindler's List, when that movie ended, and remember, the audience that went into Schindler's List was educated about World War II, concentration camps, the slaughter of the Jews. So it's not as though they were learning about this for the first time, but the way that the story was told left the audience silent. Literally, nobody left their seats. It was one of the most phenomenal things I've seen in theaters. Nobody left their seats. The movie was over, and everybody just sat there, and they couldn't even look at each other, couldn't even talk. They were just stunned into silence. The other one was Saving Private Ryan. Again, when the movie ended, people were just sitting in their seats going, what the hell just happened? What did I just see? Why am I crying? But this movie could have had that impact. This movie should have had that impact. It's a missed opportunity, especially with a director like Christopher Nolan, an actor like Cillian Murphy, and with the story itself. The material was there to do so much better. Now, again, that's just me saying what the potential of the movie could be. Christopher Nolan's goal probably was just to create an entertaining movie, not to create a social movement. But in this day and age, given the circumstances that we live in, and given the hubris of Hollywood, because we all know, and we see it every year at the Oscars, how important actors think they are, how important directors think they are. They think that they have the right to stand before the American public and the world and lecture us on various issues pertaining to, whatever's going on in the world today. And most of the time, it falls short. People watching, they're like, we don't want to hear from you. But in this case, Christopher Nolan could have taken the platform and said, this is about horrors of nuclear weapons. This is why we never pursuing. This is why we need to get rid of these weapons. Instead, he's going to probably get an Oscar. Cillian Murphy's probably going to get an Oscar, and America will be entertained. But I'm just brought up by another. Since we're talking movies, I just feel like Russell Crowe's character in the movie Gladiator, when you're in the middle of the ring. And, are you not entertained? I mean, life and death and the crowd's applauding. It's disappointing, the movie. It had potential. It could have been the 1983 The Day After, the TV series that woke Ronald Reagan up to the absolute horror of nuclear war and the need for disarmament. It could have been that. It would have been amazing had Joe Biden watched Oppenheimer and suddenly had the lights go off and turn to his people and say, why aren't we trying to stop this? Why are we? But no, Biden and everybody else who watches this movie is going to watch it and say, wow, Cillian Murphy did a great job. Christopher Nolan, what an entertaining movie. People were clapping at the end of the movie. People were clapping at the end of the movie. Why do you clap at the end of a movie about the development of a nuclear bomb? Because it entertained you. It didn't shock you. It didn't sicken you. It entertained you. I just think it was a missed opportunity.
Do you think it's going to make a difference at all?
Well, there's other people out there who maybe didn't have the same expectations I have. I know Diane Sayre, others believe that the movie shouldn't be seen as the cure in and of itself, but as the beginning of a process, meaning that, here we are so many years removed from the event, and we are many years removed from people actually being afraid of nuclear weapons. And this movie reintroduces nuclear weapons to the American public. And so if this is the first step, because what's the hardest part of running a marathon, Cynthia?
Starting.
That's right. Getting to the starting line is the hardest part. So this is the movie that takes America to the starting line and gets us going across down the path towards nuclear disarmament, then I will stand corrected and say this movie has done an amazing thing. And it still has the potential to do that. This is why Diane Sayre and people affiliated with her are passing leaflets out about the August 6th event at movie theaters as people come out of the movies. Maybe they'll take that, maybe it will awaken them up. My problem is that I'm very jaundiced about movements in general, given my experience with the anti-war movement in the lead up to the Iraq War. I have little faith in drawn out processes. I believe that that America needs bold gestures, not just gestures, but bold events. We need 1 million people in Central Park. We need 5 million people across the country coming together. We need to put that kind of pressure on the government, that if we're going to wait for something to percolate and develop over time, I just don't have the faith in the activist movement in America today that they can see it through, because they haven't trained for the marathon, Cynthia. Yes, we got them to the starting point and they got across, but come mile 3, some of them are going to pull up with cramps in their calves, and around mile 5, some are going to get shin splints. And around mile 6 and 8, the guys that didn't carb load are going to hit the wall and have to crash out, and nobody's going to finish the race because the activist movement never finishes the race. Not recently, not lately. So, again, I'd love to be proven wrong on this. I would love nothing more than this to be the beginning of a wonderful event, and I'm going to be there with them. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I'm insane. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to participate in these events because I believe in it. I believe in the importance of them. But I'm going to be honest. I don't hold out high hopes for movements anymore. I think we need events, not movements. But we'll see.
Couple of questions. Oppenheimer was a really smart guy. Would you say that's correct?
He was a genius. Yeah.
Okay. So if he was really, really smart, like you say he is, couldn't he foresee that that bomb would have been totally disastrous?
I think he could foresee that a nuclear bomb in the hands of Germany without a viable deterrence against it would be even worse.
Okay, now you say that this was a signal to Russia. Russia, and at that time, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union at that point were our allies. Why would we send such a horrific message to them when they were our allies?
Well, because America's never an ally with anybody. America only looks out for America, and that was true back then as well. We didn't fight side by side with the Soviets. I mean, very rare. I mean, people say, "Oh no, this bomber crew did that, and this tanker did that, and this ship did that." But the Soviet Army was on the Eastern Front fighting its own war. We were in North Africa and Italy and in Europe fighting our own war. It wasn't until the end of the war that we shook hands at the Elbe. And when we shook hands, it wasn't that we were coordinating any offensive operations against the Russians. We ran 2 separate wars against the Nazi enemy. We were very concerned about the fate. When I say we have to make sure people understand that mainly Churchill and the Brits, who were our allies that we fought side by side with, were very concerned about the Soviets getting into Eastern Europe, getting into the Balkans, what a post-war conflict would look like. Everybody was terrorized by the size of the Soviet army. And so the feeling was that, and it wasn't just also in Europe, but the Soviet Union had promised to enter the war against Japan. A lot of Americans were like, well, the war was almost over back then. It was, but do you understand that there were millions of Japanese in China and in Korea and in Manchuria that hadn't been defeated? and that when the Soviet Union entered the war, they defeated a Japanese army that was much larger than the totality of the Japanese forces that we defeated over the course of the last several years. People don't understand that the Soviets fought large-scale ground combat operations against the Japanese when we fought small-scale island battles against the Japanese. The Soviets fought the Japanese on the Asian continent, and they beat them. They crushed them. They destroyed them. And this, we were worried about what the Soviets would do coming into Japan. So the feeling was amongst the people in power that we needed to send the Soviets a signal that we had this terrible weapon, and that it could deter the Soviets from doing anything precipitous either in Europe or in Asia. And at the same time that argument was being put out there, you had very important people in the Truman administration saying there's no need to drop a bomb on Japan anymore. That Japan is ready to surrender. We knew the Japanese were reaching out and sending signals out for surrender. The interesting thing is the people that rejected that said there has to be unconditional surrender. The people that were promoting peace without dropping the bomb said, we might be able to have some conditions to make surrender more likely, like we'll let them keep the emperor. Well, we let them keep the emperor anyways. When we came in and MacArthur came in and occupied Japan, we were actually very lenient to the Japanese on so many levels, meaning that had we taken the conditions that we ended up giving the Japanese and using them as a negotiation prior to the conflict, saying, we'll let you have your emperor if you surrender now, we wouldn't have had to drop those bombs. Could have ended this war without the loss of so many lives, without using nuclear weapons, keeping nuclear weapons a potential as opposed to a reality. But I've written a book about this called Scorpion King. And again, Scorpion King is a reference to a speech made by Oppenheimer, an article that he wrote where he talks about two scorpions in a bottle. And in the movie, you see him making this presentation. He likened America's nuclear arsenal and the Russian Soviet nuclear arsenal as two scorpions in a bottle, that they're facing off against each other. Each one can kill the other, but the moment one strikes, the other will strike and both will die. And that's the reality of nuclear war, is that there's no security, because the security is designed to prevent them from striking. But if they strike, you strike, or if you strike, they strike, everybody dies. And all it means is that you're both going to die because you're in a bottle. You're confronting each other. You're destined to have confrontation. It's not like you take them out of the bottle and let them go off and live their own lives. You have them in a bottle, which means they're forced to confront one another. So Oppenheimer, talked about that. He was against the threat of these weapons, and I wrote this book that talks about the addiction of America to nuclear weapons. And what you see with the Manhattan Project, you see the beginning of this addiction. You see people amazed by the power. See, the power doesn't bring about fear. The power brings about amazement, and the sense of strength, and the sense of entitlement. One of the more horrifying aspects of the film is when they sit down and they start drawing large circles around major urban areas that represent the destructive power of the super, the hydrogen bomb. And you realize that these are city killers out there. And they start drawing around all the cities. And you realize how fragile the world is if these bombs are actually dropped, that the world will end. But again, they don't drive that point home. It's like doing a movie about drug addiction, but instead of scaring people away from drugs, they watch the movie and they go, cut me out some of that cocaine, baby. I want to snort it out. Or, hey, give me a shot of that heroin. That looks pretty good. I want some of that. And I think people watch this film and they leave saying, wow, America's pretty cool. We got this, we did this great thing. We have this accomplishment. And with Oppenheimer, the way they discuss his clash with the U.S. government, half the crowd, even though the people that portray the government's position are portrayed by actors who do a good job of being jerks. So from a human perspective, you're watching them going, hey, he's a jerk. he's a jerk. And you sort of feel sorry for Oppenheimer. But when you get to the substance of their allegations, it's like, well, you were a Communist Party member, weren't you?
Hmm.
And your brother was a Communist Party member, and your wife was a Communist Party member, and half the people you brought into the program are Communist Party members. And now the Soviet Union has the bomb because of the spy that you brought in, Fuchs, a British
Mhm.
scientist who was brought into the program, and the blame. And the point is, even though you're sympathetic to Oppenheimer, half your brain's going, they got a point. They got a point. This
Right.
guy was a commie, and he let a spy in, and now the Soviets got the weapon. They've got a point. No, they didn't have a point. They have the point that a drug dealer has in selling the narcotic to his to the junkie. Maybe it's gonna feel good, man. If you just do this, you're gonna feel good. But they don't have a point because you're still becoming addicted to a weapon that will destroy the world if it's used again in a major conflict between two nuclear armed superpowers. So, like I said, the movie, very entertaining, very educational. I encourage everybody to watch it. And I would hope that when you leave the theater, the movie impacts you, in maybe in a way that it didn't impact me. I hope you're afraid of nuclear weapons, and I hope it empowers you to move forward and seek a new generation of arms control and nuclear disarmament. I hope the movie does that. I just felt for me, it didn't. Maybe I had too high expectations. Maybe I know too much, but the movie, like I said, it was informative, entertaining, but it didn't do what I had hoped the movie could do.
You think that was intentional?
I think Christopher Nolan's a very smart man. He makes movies for a living, and we know that movies are capable. I mean, Oppenheimer came out at the same time as Barbie. And so there
Right,
was all this talk about Barbenheimer. I think that was the term.
right.
See both movies, and I did. I saw Barbie. Took my wife and daughters to Barbie. Entertaining movie. But Barbie was a movie that had a message. I mean, Barbie had an agenda, and it was driving that agenda home throughout the movie. There was no doubt about the fact that the director of Barbie had a message she was trying to get across, and she shoved it down your throat. So we know that directors are capable of using film to, shove a message into the audience. We know that they're capable of that. And the fact that Christopher Nolan chose not to shove the danger of nuclear weapons down your throat means it was a deliberate decision. And again, from a business perspective, from an entertainment perspective, it's not Hollywood's job to educate us. I think we need to say that right off the bat. It's if you're waiting for Hollywood to educate you, to inform you, you're a fool. It's not Hollywood's job to educate us. Hollywood exists to entertain us, and Christopher Nolan did that. This movie is very entertaining. But I also believe that, because Hollywood does on occasion attempt to jam a message down our throat, that this would have been one of those times where I said, please use this vehicle to jam that message down our throat, because it's existential in nature. We're talking about the survival of the human race. And this was an easy story that could have been, with just a few minor tweaks, he could have made that message stronger.
You just said something interesting. The survival of the human race. I don't think many people really grasp the enormity of that statement.
Well, they should. I mean, I try to encourage people to reflect, every day they wake up and realize that this could be your last day on Earth.
Right.
That you could die, and people in the Capital District need to understand that too. There are targets here nearby worth striking if you're the Russians. First of all, Albany is a state capital. We have naval nuclear facilities in the vicinity, in Niskayuna up towards Saratoga. There's a school. This is a center of biomedical research and chip manufacturing. It's going to be hit, and when it gets hit, it's going to be hit with a weapon that's between 300 and 750 kilotons. The bomb that took out Hiroshima was 12 to 15 kilotons. So we're going to be hit with a weapon that is, 20, 30, 40, 50 times bigger. Nothing will live. We will all die. And if you,
And 100,000 people died at Hiroshima, right?
correct. Well, that's just the immediate impact. Then the people that died from radiation sickness and long-term exposure and stuff like that takes the numbers up even higher. But everybody lives in the capital district. You get up, you go to the mall, you go to work, you go to the park, you mow your lawn, you tend your garden, then you die. Because that's what will happen. You won't even know it because you'll probably be outside doing something and you'll sense a flash. And by the time you look at the flash, you're already dead because you will be immediately turned into ash. But if you're outside the immediate flash, you're going to look at the flash, see it's going to blind you, knock you to the ground, and then the concussion is going to come in and kill you. But if you're even beyond that, all you're going to do is sit there. You're going to be blinded down on the ground. You're going to shake a little bit, and then the radioactive fallout's going to hit you, and your skin's going to start to peel off. You're going to start coughing up blood, and you're going to be dead within an hour. And if you're a little bit beyond that, your life might extend for about 10 hours. If you're beyond that, you might live a day or two, but you're going to die. That's the bottom line. You're going to die, and there's nothing that can save you. Even if you're in the middle of nowhere, up a burn or something like that, you're going to die because nuclear winter is going to come in, cut out the sunlight. You're going to starve to death. You're going to die of radiation no matter what. You're going to die. And this isn't something that can happen down the road. It can happen right now as we speak. People don't understand that Russia and the United States are in a very dangerous situation vis-a-vis Ukraine. That what we're doing in supplying weapons to Ukrainians is trying to tell them to do something that will automatically trigger a Russian nuclear response. We know it. We say, take Crimea. If the Ukrainians ever succeeded in threatening Crimea, we all die. That's the reality. And so anybody sits there and says, I support Ukraine. I support helping the Ukrainians recapture. So why don't you go to do the easy thing? Take a shotgun, put it in your mouth, pull the trigger, and blow your brains out. Do me a favor. They don't bring me with you. If you want to die, kill yourself. Okay, there's plenty of ways to do it that only you die. But by sitting there and saying that you want to support Ukraine's reconquest of the Crimea Peninsula, you're saying you want to kill me. You want to kill my family. You want to kill my friends, my neighbors. And I hate you for it because you're stupid. You're ignorant. And this is what we have to deal with right now. Every day that we live, we are at risk of a mistake being made, a miscalculation being made, etc. People are celebrating the fact that the United States provided technology to the Ukrainians that damaged a Russian warship in the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. Hey, wow, that was cool. Keep doing it and you're going to die. That's just the reality of it, guys. This is stupidity in the extreme. And we no longer have arms control talks. We're no longer discussing how to limit arms control. We're getting in the process of starting to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to modernize our nuclear force, but we're going to modernize it without the constraint of arms control, which means we're going to go into an uncontrolled arms race with the Russians. And that only ends one way. You guessed it. We're going to die. So this is why I feel that a movie like Oppenheimer had such potential, because we are really we're in a situation that's far more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was controlled. It was a controlled crisis. Up front, both sides knew what the objectives were. The Russians wanted the Jupiter missiles out of Turkey. We had our own Jupiter missiles, medium-range missiles in Turkey, outside of Izmir, in Chile Air Base, and they were aimed at the Soviet Union. They were actually 12-minute flight time from Izmir to Pitsunda, which is the dacha where Khrushchev vacationed frequently on the Black Sea. So whenever Khrushchev was in Pitsunda, he was 12 minutes away from being vaporized by a Jupiter missile. And the Russians are like, we don't want the Jupiters here. But we wouldn't withdraw them. So the Russians went, all right, we're going to put missiles in Cuba and put you under the same threat window that we exist every day with the Jupiters. And the Russians let it be known, take the Jupiters out, these come out. There was a controlled crisis. There was a known way to bring it to an end, and both sides worked together to bring it to an end to avoid a nuclear war. And even then, we almost screwed up. We started putting depth charges on a Soviet submarine who almost responded with a nuclear torpedo to take out the American fleet. And that would have triggered a nuclear war. Today, there's no constraint, none whatsoever. We are doing stupid things one after the other. And at some point in time, we may very well trip the wire that sets off the nuclear crisis without knowing that we're tripping, because we're not talking to them. We're not talking to the Russians. This is all happening in a vacuum of, a dearth of information. And when you're not informed, you're ignorant. When you're ignorant, you're afraid. And when you're afraid, you do stupid things. So the United States and Russia today are afraid because they're not talking. There isn't passing of information. We are so close to something horrible happening. Nobody cares about it. Nobody knows about it. We just live our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, I'm just here to tell you right now, you may not be alive tomorrow. And if you are, you may not be alive the next day. And if that's how you want to spend your life, going from one day to the next, praying that a mistake isn't made that results in a nuclear war, so be it. I ought to take the initiative to try and get my government to stop doing stupid things, to stop provoking a confrontation with the Russians, and then to start working together with the Russians to get rid of the weapons who have traced their lineage to Oppenheimer's gadget that he blew up on July 16th, 1945 in Alamogordo, New Mexico, the Trinity test, and the movie Oppenheimer captures that.
So speaking of movies, Scott, how's things going with your movie?
Well, I mean, as I've said to everybody involved, I have a daughter getting married soon, and that is my priority in terms of allocation of time and resources. We are working on a trailer for the movie. We hope to have that done soon. And once the trailer's out, we'll use that to help raise money for the continued production of the film. We can only do that which we have the money to pay for, and so there will be fundraising efforts underway. I think you and I are talking about the potential of a telethon type event online. I've ordered up some of the coins that I had used in Russia, the commemorative coins, and we're going to make them available as a fundraising vehicle, and as an incentive for fundraising. And as we get, there's certain milestones, that as soon as we get enough money on hand, we can move forward to do this part of the movie, and then as we get more money, we can move it into that, and then we'll try and wait. So we're not going to wait for all the money to come in. We'll start moving the film down, and I'd like to have it done by next year. That would be the goal, to get it out in time to have an influence on the 2024 election.
Okay, so you have a website up where people can donate now if they wanted to?
Sure. If you go to scottritterextra.com and you navigate on the top, you'll see there's a tab there for Waging Peace, the movie, and you can donate there. You can also go to wagingpeace.fund, F-U-N-D, and that'll take you to a page where you can donate money, and that money goes straight to the movie. That goes into the operating expenses of the movie.
Okay, Scott. So you have a big week coming up. So after your family event, we'll talk again, and we'll start working on doing a marathon online. So
okay,
you've been listening to Scott Ritter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like the show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.